Compliance is a profession where people work tirelessly to make the world a better place. And there are hundreds of amazing and inspiring women who have helped the field develop into what it is today. Great Women in Compliance is part of the Compliance Podcast Network, so join Mary, Shirley, and Lisa Fine as they talk with women in compliance who are making a difference.
Welcome to the Great Women in Compliance podcast with Lisa Fine and Mary Shirley. I'm Mary Shirley, and you can find our podcast on the Compliance Podcast Network with a load of other compliance-centric podcasts, as well as on our very own landing page at Corporate Compliance Insights. You can hear about our origin story there, as well as access all of the podcasts that we've recorded to date. Today, we're very pleased to welcome back Sonia Zeledon, who is speaking with us about what it's like to have joined the Hershey Company and is sharing a lot of her great experiences and some best practices with us. And for those of you who caught the last episode, you'll remember that we left off with a nod to the code of conduct that Hershey has, which I love because it's just got so many best practice features about it. So if you're looking for a bit of inspiration to revamp yours, I would recommend that amongst your reference points. And so along a similar vein, Sonia, you also have a really great supplier code of conduct. It looks just as good as your code of conduct. You're really easy on the eye and easy to absorb for the reader. Will you walk us through some of the targeted ways in which you have worked towards building a robust supplier compliance program?
Yes, so we're very proud of the supplier code of conduct that was updated this past November of 2019. This was in collaboration with our CSR group, which is really embedded in ensuring that we provide the best possible mechanism that we can comply with all of the international laws that kind of cover a lot of the cocoa producers, right? And or the ones who purchase the cocoa from cocoa farms all throughout the world. So we're very cognizant of the fact that it's a very challenging environment, and we do our best to ensure that our suppliers are complying with our guidelines and our code of ethics and our supplier code of conduct. So if you see, when we take a look at it, that we try to align our code with the International Bill of Human Rights, the ILO Declaration of Fundamental Principles and Rights to Work, and the OECD guidelines. So all the international guidelines that are kind of key when it comes to, the products that we source from around the world. And it goes, like I was mentioning in a previous podcast, is to ensure that we push down our real ethics and commitment to goodness and doing good for the world. We're really, really proud of the fact that we try to really have a strong commitment against, forced labor and human trafficking, no discrimination, making sure that we have food safety and quality, the environment, land rights, all those things, and then of course, that's embedded in the supplier code of conduct is our overarching code that has all the other elements, but it was a real labor of love, and we're really proud of it. And we hope that it kind of shows and highlights our commitment to all these issues around the world.
Yeah, well, I hope it's positive feedback, as nerdy as it is, that I saw it and thought it was awesome. So it was That's appreciated. Yeah, outside of your company, it was noticed and appreciated. And would you say that is the supplier code of conduct at the heart of your supplier compliance program? Is that the sort of the fundamental aspect of it, or are there other prongs that you value as well?
There are other prongs. So our supplier code of conduct, it goes at the heart into ensuring that we push down our commitment But there are other things as well, right? So we ensure that the contract language is there with all of our suppliers, that our code of ethics goes hand in hand. So typically we have third parties and suppliers not only sign the supplier code of conduct, but also our code of conduct, right? Which is kind of like, without being cliche, like our Bible, right? And so, I wouldn't say, I think both go hand in hand. And both are at the heart of our compliance program.
Yeah, and you mentioned partnering with the CSR team, which leads really nicely into another question that I have for you. I think it's really important when we're in compliance to not be so narrow in terms of just working very hard on our own initiatives and then pushing them out to people without adequately consulting, because a lot of the time we do have overlap with other subject matter experts. In this case, the CSR team was a big one for a supplier code of conduct, and we see a lot of overlap in other areas as well. But also, a lot of the time, our colleagues are our key stakeholders in terms of the eventual audience that's going to have to work with these documents or processes. And so it's key to involve them. However, one of the downsides I find is that when there are too many cooks in the kitchen, it can be verging on impossible to get something done, because you'll have, one person saying, oh, we need to have something short and snappy and concise. Then someone else will be like, oh, that's just, it does not have enough detail. How are we supposed to guide anyone with, almost nothing here? And so there's this tension between people's different views and approaches, and that can drag things out. But then on the other hand, if you don't consult with the right people and you don't foresee issues yourself that might be problems further down the track during implementation and rollout, that can also cause delays, and then your stakeholders get angry with you because you're foisting something upon them unilaterally, which generally I find does not make one a popular compliance officer. So in light of this, what I feel is a very real balancing issue, I'd love to get your advice, Sonia, on how you deal with this type of situation. Where do you find the right balance, and how do you know that you've consulted enough and it's time to move on and get to the implementation stage?
Yeah, and that's a real situation, right? Compliance does not work it's not work in a bubble, and I wholeheartedly agree that compliance has to be embedded in the different aspects of the business and really lean on subject matter expertise in other fields in order to effectively push the program. If we have a compliance program in paper and don't have the commitment and the buy-in from the other stakeholders, it's might as well use the paper as paperweight, right? Or as fuel to fire. It's worthless. So it's very, very important that we get the buy-in from our stakeholders, that we collaborate and interact and ensure that everybody's committed to the end product. In that process, I do also agree that there is that balancing act from overcommitment, or should I say, like you said, too many cooks in the kitchen, people putting pen to paper, and to the point where you're working on one project for too long and never executing anything. What helped me quite a bit is having a little bit of project management skills, where if you right out of the gate you propose deadlines and timelines, and really keep people to those deadlines and timelines, knowing in the back that it's going to extend a little more, right, and not be so rigid, but having those kind of guardrails saying, okay, we have to get this pushed up by X date, and we have to get, we can disagree and agree 1,000 times over, but this has to be pushed out, X quarter or Y date, because otherwise, if you have a bunch of lawyers at the table or a bunch of business people, and nobody is going to be satisfied with the end product, because with the knee-jerk reaction of making something perfect all the time, or not agreeing with the approach, right? And then you're going back and forth and back and forth. There is you need to have that person who say, okay, guys, this is it, right? this is the last edit or the last discussion, and then we have to move on, and then we have to make a decision. So for me, it's giving timelines, providing roadmaps, and providing kind of a list of things that have to be done within a certain period of time, and then checking them off as we're going, and then periodically checking and say, okay, it's been this amount of time, we really have to get through it, and then be accountable for the fact that where we have not executed on timely or appropriately, and then successes, right? Oh, we got this out on time and properly, and everything was fine. But for the most part, in the positions that I've held, people have been really great with that, and very collaborative. I've been lucky. I have not been at a place where people have been, not being willing to take ownership or to share ownership or to share responsibility. So I've been fortunate from that sense, but have things dragged on for longer than I wish? Absolutely. But that's normal, right? It's just managing people, and trying to get things out the door. But
yeah, I love your project management answer because it resonates a lot for me. I've certainly not got this one down yet. It's an area that I continue to develop, but one of the things that I've found borderline life-changing has been the project management tool of using a RACI chart. So defining who's responsible, who's accountable, who will be consulted, and who will be informed as part of the project. And outlining that right from the start can really help people to understand, okay, where does my responsibility or my duty to act begin and where does it end? So if you know that you're being consulted with but you're not accountable, that may put the person psychologically in a better position to say, okay, I've given my point of view, and even if it's incorporated, but perhaps not fully implemented, but definitely been considered in some way, that's where my responsibility ends. And because I'm not ultimately accountable, I don't need to push for my idea that I think is best to be the one that's chosen. So I think your project management thought process there is really well aligned with what I found has helped me. And I, now that I've heard your response and thought of it beyond the RACI, I'll be looking at more project management tools to see how I can be better at maintaining this balance. So thank you for that great answer.
And there's some great ones now with technology, and there are some fantastic apps and softwares for project management without the need of a project management certification, which in and of itself is super complicated when you start looking at it. But these apps simplify them so perfectly that somebody like me who has no project management experience can actually follow through, and then we can keep everybody accountable and on track. So I highly recommend it. We can have this another conversation altogether about this, project management tools, but definitely highly recommend them.
That's interesting, and I will be getting in touch with you to get some recommendations, because I didn't realize that there were such, of course, there's a reason why there's an app for that, is such an overused phrase. I shouldn't be surprised, but I wasn't aware. So I will definitely check in with you on what ideas you might have for me on that front. So changing tack a little bit now, one of your specialty areas is national security. Will you share with us when it's necessary to think about national security as part of a compliance program, and how you've assessed for those types of risks in the past?
Yeah, in my previous role in tech, national security was really embedded in compliance. Not so much in the food sector with Hershey, but I get, the Hershey kids is going to get you in some national security situations. So I'm kidding. But from a tech perspective, it really drives, when trade sanction situations where you're trying to import or export products that have technical specifications where they're encrypted, or they're used for the military, or they could be used for nefarious purposes by juntas or guerrillas or military or things like that. Those kind of situations have to be really closely monitored by compliance professionals, right? In order to ensure that we are not, one, compliant by our own regulations, from our own respective governments, but that we're not, without really thinking 3 clicks ahead, selling products that could pose a national security problem in the future that you may have not even thought about, right? And give you perfect examples, right? You see it in the news, so many tech companies whose product initially were really socially driven or or with the purpose of connecting, and then they have been used for tools, that impact your country's national security or other countries' national security, right? So from a compliance perspective, you're kind of trying to look ahead to see whether either products that are being in development or products that are being rolled out have any of those sort of issues, or that you will encounter those issues as you're pushing them out to the market. Fascinating stuff, right? And things change every day, and technology changes. But that was something that was really embedded in the tech company space that I was in.
Great. Okay. Excellent. And forgive me for another overused phrase, but in light of the new normal, how have you redefined both your compliance program goals and personal goals for 2020?
Oh my goodness. So there was, and again, not to overuse this word, but I feel like I use it at least 5 times a day, the pivot, right? We pivoted and had to address, we had these really lofty goals in the second quarter. And those goals were kind of put in the back burner, right? Because like I mentioned in the previous podcast, we had to really address pandemic-related situations from a both compliance and privacy perspective. So, we had to kind of put our goals in the back and we had to deal with, trying to deal with all the fires that were happening, right? In, the pandemic, the health and safety, the pivoting to working from home. We had this, fantastic 2020 training map where we were going to go all over the world. And then the pandemic hit, and then we weren't going anywhere, things like that, right? And it just, if anything else, I always think that compliance professionals need to be adaptable, right? Adaptability. And I think, and because we were able to adapt really quickly, the business and other stakeholders saw that we could be on the forefront of a lot of the initiatives, right? So we my team pivoted really quickly and started to address COVID issues, help with the communication campaign to try to drive out communications and training related to COVID and the pandemic. Like I mentioned in the other part, policies, procedures, ensuring that we were embedded in all those decisions and and had a seat at the table, really drove that. But that put everything else, second. Right now that we're kind of on autopilot, with that part of stuff, at least, hopefully, knock on wood, nothing, blows up, that has to do with the pandemic. But now we're shifting and refocusing on driving, trainings and policies and everything else, and just shifting training to more virtual, a lot more different communication. So those kind of things, shifted. And from personal goals, I think the George Floyd issues and the race matters issues that kind of came up did really honed in on my personal goals for 2020 to ensure that I continue to drive diversity into our professions, that I continue advocating for those who don't have a voice, that I continue to ensure that I increase the pipeline, right? That I reach down and I pull up all different types of diversity, women, LGBTQ, all different types, because we really, the voice of diversity is important. And we have a lot of work to do in this country. And people like me and others really need to be the voice of those who are not heard.
Finally, the question that I think we've all been dying to know about, what are the chocolatey perks of working at Hershey's?
Well, I can tell you that in the first couple of months I was working at Hershey, I swear they call it like the Hershey 15 because there is so much candy. There is so much candy. No, but, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, it's been closed, but you get to sample all the new products that are before anyone else does. So we get the products who are sold outside of your own regions, right? So we have a little store in our main office that has all the products that are sold around the world, which is very different, right? You in certain parts of the world, because of palettes and likes and things like that, they're slightly different than in other places. So you get to taste the different products. You have unlimited amounts of candy and snacks, and really, really, really generous discount to buy lots of candy for your friends and family.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I have a sweet tooth, so that sounds like heaven. Let me know when you're next hiring. Amazing. Thank you for ending that one on such a fun note. Really appreciate you taking the time to do a 2-part series with us, Sonia. You're amazing. The work you do is amazing. Thank you so much for your contribution to the community, both within your company and outside, to help those amplify their voice.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Well, dear listener, before we wrap up for today, wanted to share an idea with you, and it stems from the book How Women Rise, which was published in the last couple of years, and it focuses on some of the habits that we women have in the workplace that are more of a hindrance than a help. And habit number 4 is building rather than leveraging relationships, which you may be guilty of. And it's not a bad thing, of course, to build relationships, and many of us do them for reasons well beyond the work sphere. We do them because we genuinely enjoy meeting with a lot of the people in our professional capacity that make our hearts sing on the personal front, and people who share the same values as us. However, it seems that our gentlemen counterparts are a lot better at leveraging the relationships that they've built over the years and using them to further their career goals. So when women are asked why it is that they're uncomfortable with sort of banking in some of their relationships and leveraging them more, the typical responses are, I don't want others to think that I'm using them. I don't want to seem self-serving. I'm not a hustler. I want to be seen as genuine and authentic. And I can very much relate to some of those reasons. And I think what's important for us to remember on the flip side is that a lot of the people that we've built relationships with, they feel the authenticity of those relationships. They know that you're genuine, and that means that they really want to help and give you a leg up where they can. So if they can see an opportunity to help you, a lot of people will really want to step forward and do that. However, I understand that remembering that may not be enough. So I have an idea for you, and this is from Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist, who I refer to a lot because I think he's awesome, and his work is very directly related to how we can prosper in the workplace, both men and women. And I read in one of his books about reciprocity rings. And a reciprocity ring is the idea where you explicitly ask for something, you vocalize what it is that you want, and then other people in the community listen in and see how they can help you. So the whole point is essentially to be self-serving and to give back at the same time. So we actually started up a reciprocity ring in our Great Women in Compliance podcast community on LinkedIn. Feel free to jump in and join us if you're not already a member, and see if you can contribute to the conversation. So I wanted to share this with you because if the idea of leveraging your relationships makes you feel a little bit icky, what about starting a reciprocity ring? So you're showing that you're giving back to the community first and foremost. Every time you see someone put up their hand and have an ask that you can help with, with, you help them out, do them a favor in some way. And then when you're feeling comfortable, and hopefully you're feeling comfortable pretty early on, sing out to the world what it is that you want. And the universe will be listening, because that's basically that. Those relationships, those people that you've built around you. If you have success with this, or just feeling encouraged to leverage your relationships a little more, and do so in a way that you don't feel as uncomfortable, and share some of your ideas with us, we'd love to hear from you. We always love your feedback, and thank you so much for listening in, and all your support as always. We will be back next time. See you then.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Great Women in Compliance. We hope you'll join us in honoring the great women in the compliance field by subscribing to this podcast and leaving a review.